Upgrades.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another JVS movie review. Today, we are bringing you the review of what most people would consider a horror classic, and it's only 2 films that they were made. And now we get a reboot here in 2025, and this one is I Know What You Did Last Summer. And here's a quick synopsis. When 5 friends inadvertently cause a deadly car crash, they cover up their involvement and make a pact to keep it secret rather than to face the consequences. A year later, the past comes back to haunt them as they learn someone knows what they did last summer. Stalked by a mysterious killer, they soon seek help from 2 survivors of the legendary Southport Massacre of '97. This one is directed by Jennifer Robinson. It stars Jennifer Love Hewitt, Freddie Prinze Jr., Madelyn Cline, Chase Wonders, Jonah King, and Tyreek Weathers. Now, for the I Know What You Did Last Summer franchise, this franchise never reached the peak of Scream and never reached the peak of Final Destination, but it's always looped into those 2 films because it was a point in time where, like, all audiences wanted to see these type of films. Now, Final Destination and Scream produce a lot of sequels. For the I Know What You Did Last Summer franchise, it only produced 1 sequel people recognize. It produced a straight to DVD sequel nobody brings up at all. So for most people, it's I Know What You Did Last Summer and I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, and that's it. And that means this franchise has been dormant for a lot longer than a lot of these other franchises were before we got their reboots in recent times here. But part of the issue with this movie for I Know What You Did Last Summer. The premise of I Know What You Did Last Summer is as simple and simplistic as humanly possible. And because of that, it doesn't lend to someone being able to be overly creative with the way they set up the film. And that's excluding the television show, because there was I Know What You Did Last Summer television show that was not good at all. But but because of the premise and the way the premise is set up, and because it's so simple and it's so by the numbers, it kind of doesn't leave the wiggle room necessary for things to be creative as we're introduced to these new characters. And just like the original, and literally you can almost rip it immediately from the original. Friends go out on a trip to go see fireworks. A tragic accident happens. Someone dies. And then a cover-up, and then we jump to a year later. It literally is the same setup from the '97 film here. And that is one of the biggest issues with I Know What You Did Last Summer is, while you understand the need because of the way the setup is to almost take the exact premise from the '97 film, but unfortunately they do nothing to make it fresh. This movie feels like I'm back in '97 in the worst ways humanly possible. It moves incredibly slow for a horror film nowadays. And that was another shocking thing, just how slow this film was paced throughout. The bright spot, and I'll get to that before we get to anything else that I was thrown off about, and that is Miss Madelyn Cline, who's, to me, the lead in this film. She's funny. She embodies what it means to be a scream queen in this movie and does it so well. Her timing is impeccable in this film. So much so that you just kind of wish the movie was better. The plot was better to keep you more intrigued with this one character. It felt like they surrounded this amazing character with a bunch of characters that were just stock for horror films. And that's what you feel like as you're watching the film, is that all these characters move the exact same way you would expect any of these characters to move in horror movies. So it kind of goes against what we have recently received from the reboots, whether it was the Scream reboot that we had, which both of them were amazing films, or the one that we got this year from Final Destination, which found a way to take a premise that everyone knew, even certain setups that everyone knew was going to happen, but still make it fresh. Here with I Know What You Did Last Summer, again, none of this is fresh. And because of that, it just feels like it's limping along for a very long time. This is not a short horror movie. This is about an hour and 40, hour and 50 minutes. And it felt like it was just limping on and on and on until you get to a conclusion that you couldn't see coming a mile away, unfortunately. But one of the positives, again, besides Madelyn in this film, is the return of Jennifer Love Hewitt. And the film attempts to lean on nostalgia a tad bit to get you more interested in it, to get a deeper connection to the audience. It doesn't really work well, especially with her and Freddie Prinze, that the chemistry that they had in those first two films is what carried those first two films. Here, it doesn't, you don't feel any form of chemistry when they get on screen with one another here. It almost feels like they're detached from the project also. While Jennifer is always great to see on film, but here it just felt like she was just going through the paces to get the film over with. And that's the biggest issue with I Know What You Did Last Summer is everything feels like it's just going through the paces to get it over with. The kill scenes, the things that you are coming to these teen/young adult horror films to see, none of them were that creative. Most of them were just unnecessary. And what I mean by that is the premise of I Know What You Did Last Summer is that the killer is going after the people who did him wrong. In this film, I want to say they dropped 4 bodies before we get to even thinking about the main principal cast that did what they did last summer. It just kind of makes you wonder, like, was the goal just to increase the body count and hopefully that would intrigue the audience more than building suspense? Like, this film is jump scare free almost, completely with no suspense, no thrills at all. It just feels so lazy. It feels like this is the backtrot of the horror films of 2025. Like, we've gotten some very interesting horror films of 2025 that have been really good, or 2024 to 2025, that's been really good here. And with I Know What You Did Last Summer, it just feels like someone decided that we can use this name and we can make it a cash grab. And we can hopefully get that nostalgic audience that went to go see these other films and have them tune into this film. Unfortunately, this film falls flat because of it. And by the time you get through 2 of the longest acts I've been through recently in horror films, and we get to a 3rd act, the film goes from, for me, being a below average horror movie to becoming possibly one of the most disrespectful horror movies of recent memory here. This movie, and I don't know if it's necessarily the team behind it, it feels like there's little to no respect for the first 2 films in this franchise, the ones that everyone remembers and that has developed a cult following. By the time you get to the 3rd act and some of the twists and turns you get in the film, and especially in the 3rd act, it becomes just disrespectful to the past films. And just for that reason alone, it kind of makes you wish that this was named anything else but I Know What You Did Last Summer. But I Know What You Did Last Summer, dropping this Friday from Sony. Out of a possible 10, I'm going to give I Know What You Did Last Summer a 3 out of 10. And those 3 are strictly for Madelyn Cline, who's amazing in this movie here. But pacing is a problem. Story is a problem. The respect for the overall franchise is a problem. I Know What You Did Last Summer is not an enjoyable movie to sit through. In all honesty, it could possibly be a movie that I would tell most people, and this is hard because I don't say this about any horror film. This is a horror film that you could possibly skip and not ever watch, because if you are a fan of this franchise, especially the first 2 films, because we exclude the television show in the 3rd film, but if you're a fan of those first 2 films, I would almost recommend you not to watch this film. It by that 3rd act is just so bad. It's so bad. It's so disrespectful to this franchise that I lost all, like, it was already not going to be, and it was already not the most enjoyable film to sit through. But at least with Madelyn, you're getting the fun elements of a slasher film. And you kind of like, okay, I can see how people can be entertained by this. But by the time you get through a 3rd act, which ramps up the pacing from like a 4 to 20, the way they run through stuff. But then when you're running through things, then you become overtly disrespectful to the franchise, and then that just throws off everything. And that's including a mid-credit scene, which is really, really good for fans of the franchise, but makes absolutely no sense. It's literally no setup possible for that mid-credit scene to make any sense. It just felt like something that was just thrown in at the last minute. Again, this whole film feels like the goal is just to capitalize off of all the rest of the horror reboots and to give you a horror reboot of a film and of a franchise that has a core audience, and hope that that core audience is going to come out and check this movie out. But that's my review. Let us know what you think. This has been another JVS movie review. Peace, people.